Hello, everybody. This is Joshua Hatton with One Nation Under Whiskey Podcast. I'm joined today, and I am joined, as always, by the wonderful, the dear, Mr. Jason Neil Patrick Harris Johnston Yellen.
Guilty.
As charged. I'm going to throw you in the clink. I'm going to throw you in the clink. You're so guilty of that.
I tell you, as you were busy there saying joined today, over this past weekend, we were people in the same vicinity, surrounded by many friends in the same vicinity. And that was quite a wonderful, the adjective used earlier, that was a wonderful occasion to be together.
It was an absolutely special time. You, your family coming up for my birthday celebration. For those that don't know, I am officially an old man. I've turned 50 as of the 6th of December. And so many people flew out, drove up, drove over.
Yeah, hanging out with Jess and Sweet Scott is always a treat. The Nolans in from Chicago was remarkable. John Kay and his wife, J. Cole and his partner. I don't want to speak out of school. Is partner the correct descriptor there?
That is correct. That's the dear Katie.
Partner.
Yeah.
Katie. She was lovely as well. It was, and then of course your bandmates. I know you do a few tipples with them. The pour list from that night, just watching your bandmates. Like, is this stuff people drink? Is this? Yeah, that's honestly, it's stuff people covet. Interesting. I love those guys so much. And it's interesting. You can definitely tell the band mate friends and the whiskey friends who are like, well, actually, this actually was released. Actually,
yeah, it's right. I mean, they came into it with no context. It kind of reminds me. I was having a conversation with someone about the Book of Mormon, the musical.
Checks out.
And just, I love it. I think it's hilarious from beginning to end. And I thought that I got every joke. And this woman that I know that grew up Mormon, she says, "Oh, no, you don't fully get it all. If you grow up Mormon, you're missing half the jokes at least." So I kind of feel like my bandmates were the same. Like, they like whiskey. They think they know it. But then there's us who know it a little more, just a little more.
I don't want to put together an incomplete Joshua Hatton list, but I do want to call out, because there's some that I've been thinking about over the course of the weekend and then again on my drive home that was long and belabored in miserable conditions. And you ask yourself, why am I doing this? Oh, yes, because it was A, Joshua's 50th birthday celebration, and B, there were some remarkable pours to be had. But that dimple, I keep calling it a dimple. I keep using the UK name. So the Hague dimple
pinch
is one I discussed with my dad. And so this is the Hague pinch in America. But that being bottled somewhere around the 1950s and having that incredible little spring-loaded cap that is known to corrode.
Yes.
And to have that be in perfect condition and the whiskey contained therein, it was a real treat. I think one of the things we'd said around the table was and it might be a bit of a tautology, and I apologize if it is, but it just simply didn't taste like modern whiskey.
No.
And it's not to put it on a pedestal and say, oh, we had something that was bottled in the 1950s and this will never be topped. It was just different.
Yeah.
And it was a good different. I've thought about that one a fair bit.
The thing that surprised me the most about it, which, there were two things that surprised me. What you had just said, the fact that it's unlike any other whiskey that we've tasted. It was just so unique. Is the fact that after 70 so years of it being bottled, it's was bright and fresh
Yep.
and engaging. There was no touch of that old bottle effect. It was just wonderful. It surprised the heck out of me because I have a couple of those bottles, and the first one that I opened, because I inherited them, right? My cousin's father-in-law passed away, and I was given bottles because I'm the whiskey guy in the family. And I opened one bottle maybe for my 45th, and the spring cap had 100% corroded, and that liquid was awful.
Oh,
And
gosh.
so I felt when we broke that out that it was either going to be awful or it was going to be okay. And the fact that it was remarkable,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
You know, yeah.
Talk about being in the right place, though. It is interesting because the cap was so clean, and because the liquid, the whiskey, was so bright and fresh. If that had come from an auction, I would have been a little worried about why is that spring cap so clean, and why is that liquid that's been in bottle for 70 years so fresh. To know that came from within family and was never on the open market, was never bought and sold. I love that type of moment where you're like, oh no, this is the real deal. This has been in the back of someone's cabinet for decades upon decades. Yeah, that was real special. One for you
Favorite pour?
as you think back.
You know, I'll answer that well, how do I answer that poorly?
Don't give me an incomplete Joshua Hatton list.
No,
Don't do that.
I'm not going to do that. Here's what I will say is I wish that we opened the Lagavulin 21, the 2007 release, a bit earlier than we had. Because within the context of everything else that was poured, it seemed less impactful.
Oh, I'm so glad you bring this up because I completely disagree with you.
Oh, good.
So for me, it was poured at the exact right time. And I remember sitting with it and nosing it and tasting it and thinking, this is every bit as good as I remember it being. And further than that, this remains the best thing. Even in that night's company, it showed its worth.
Okay.
And I was purposely being critical in the sense of being a critic. I was purposely being critical of it to see if it did stand up and if it did serve memory. And it was a home run for me.
So maybe I took the wrong path. Maybe I decided to not be critical and just go into it saying, no, I know this one's my favorite. I know this is the best. I just need to sit back and enjoy it rather than really analyzing it or analyze it. So I will say the one that stuck out the most, I had, this is going to sound like I'm being so braggadocious, and I am. The one that I had...
I'm being so braggadocious on my own podcast. I'm a 50-year-old white male with a podcast and a delicious whiskey story.
I had the two sister casks, the two green Springbanks, 1973 distilled, 1991 bottled. Yeah. You had the darker green and the lighter green, and I was expecting the darker of the two to be the one to win out, and it was the lighter of the two that I just found so complex and so engaging and herbaceous and spicy, yet, floral in an odd way. And like, it was coming at me from every angle, yet balanced at the same time.
I'm smiling at you because if you want a fwa 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 moment, it was Bonnie Nolan saying, I really like each of these whiskeys, but I can't help but think a 50-50 of them would be amazing. And we got your permission to pour one glass of 50-50, and we passed it around the table. And to a person, we went, "Oof, that's nice." And so it's one thing to pull out the green Springbanks, right? It's another thing to think the lighter was better than the darker. Yeah. I think it's another thing to then make a 50-50 of them. And go, oh yeah, yeah.
Listen,
delicious.
It's still single malt. We didn't make a blend, right? We just married two casks from the same distillery together, and it was remarkable. Like, yeah, the two kind of, yeah, it's so funny. It shows you how much we drank that night. I sort of forgot that happened, but now returning to that memory, I remember saying like, oh yeah, like you complete me. Each cask said to the other, you complete me.
Yeah, remarkable, really remarkable. Yeah, my wishful moment in looking back was I remember pouring the Comus 4.2.
Yeah.
I don't remember tasting it. And I'm glad that I didn't pour anything else after the Comus 4.2.
Yeah.
That was my moment where I was like, oh, the night's over at this point. It's been incredible, and the Comus 4.2 is one of my absolute longtime favorites. Not remembering tasting it is I'm glad there weren't 5 more after. We still had 5 unopened on the table.
Yeah.
It was like, it's been a good night. We've all had fun. Let's not continue the silliness.
Yep.
So thank you for inviting me and making it so special, and those pours were, I'll be thinking about them for a long time.
It was that night was everything I wanted it to be, and then the following night at Scottish Dave's, just so that night for me. So for those that don't know, Scottish Dave's in Clinton, Connecticut, just a fantastic, proper Scottish bar. And 2 of my bands played there, and 2 other bands played, and it was this moment in time where all of my worlds collided. From family to my oldest friends in the world, to my whiskey family, to my friends' family, to my bandmates, to like just every corner of my life. You know, it was like that episode of Seinfeld where George is like, worlds collide, or something like that, and it was just that, and being able to play music for a whole series of people who'd never seen me or heard me play before was nice.
Before even getting to Scottish Dave's, I got a text from Jess who was like, Chris Riesbeck and Charlie Prince are here. I was like, are they? Wow. And I got to hang out with them, chat with them, catch up with them. Yeah. Like that's what these types of celebrations are all about. Bringing people together for a singular purpose, and then great catching up and drinking Belhaven, straight out of Glasgow, and chatting with Riesbeck and Charlie. It was really rocking, and seeing you rock out on the stage and seeing you in your element was tons of fun. Both of my boys loved it, absolutely loved it.
I'm so glad to hear that.
And Joe Nolan's wave. We were doing Joe Nolan's wave on the way home in the car, so the boys are all over that.
Man.
So happy birthday. That was well done, and happy belated birthday to Sweet Scott as well. We got to enjoy time with him. In the interest of birthdays and the time of year and giving, one of the things that we always I'm prone to do is make off the cuff book recommendations, and here we sit with some Christmas buying, or maybe it's a December birthday, or maybe you're listening to this looking for Hanukkah inspiration or other, whatever the other may be. Maybe you're at someone's house for drams and you want to take them a thank you gift. Couple of recommendations, and I know you're on board for at least one of these, Joshua. Is I finally had a chance to sit down with David Sturck's book, Independent Scotch, The History of Independent Bottlers, and read it cover to cover. And it's been one of the first times for me reading a whiskey story, non-fiction whiskey story, right? A whiskey history where I lived through the exact years he's describing. And I know the people he's talking about, even when it comes to importers and distributors. And he's talking about particular whiskey fans and particular whiskey festivals. And he's talking about there being a lot of whiskey available, and you could get some really advanced ages of it, to whiskey started to get popular, which was great for sales, not necessarily good for cask buying. And things that he was saying about cask availability 5 years before you and I were saying the same things about cask availability. And I think there's also something special when you're able to read a text in the author's voice. And I don't just mean that, David's Yorkshire accent or anything of that nature, but just his worldview, his perspective.
Yeah.
Right? Knowing that so well and reading that through the text was really fun as well. However, if you don't know David Stirk at all, if you've only heard of him from ye interwebs, it's a book well worth your time.
Brilliant.
And did you crack it? Have you thumbed it?
You know my problem. I started thumbing it, and I only have time to read before bed, really.
Oh, that's a tough one.
And so what I've started doing was, any book I want to read, I just go straight to audiobook. So I own it, but I haven't listened to it, and to be quite honest, I don't know if it's even on. I mean, that's how I listen to.
There's an audio book of David Stirk's.
Well, I did By the Smoke and the Smell for Thad Vogler,
Thad.
and that was
Absolutely.
on there. So I'm checking right now. You can do it live. No, it's not on there. At least it's not
no
an
chance.
Audible.
Well, here's another one for you to look up. So, in addition to David's book, I'm giving full credit here. Octopus Books USA, who published Dave Broom's A Sense of Place,
Yes.
sent me a copy of A Passion for Whiskey by Ian Wisniewski.
I have that book as well. It just came in like last week. So there you go.
Fantastic!
Yeah. Oh,
Fantastic.
brilliant. And you've read it.
So I gave that a read as
good,
well, and that's an interesting one. Ian really writes as an excitable whiskey fan, a whiskey geek, right? Which is how you and I describe ourselves as well. And so he gets quite nerdy. And as I was reading it, there was parts of me thinking, would I recommend this book to listeners of One Nation Under Whiskey? And then I would get into parts of it where I would think, oh yeah, this is right up the alleys, the streets. He gets nerdy on cut points. He gets nerdy about yeast.
Yep.
The types of conversations he's having with Islay producers, specifically Islay producers, really move towards the nerdy, and I think it's a good one. What I particularly like is he goes through every Islay distillery, even the ones in project, and so Illy gets a couple, maybe a few pages. Portnatruin gets a couple, maybe a few pages.
Okay.
And the Portnatruin information comes from Sukhinder Singh. We've certainly spoken to Ollie about Portnatruin, and so Ian's comes from Sukhinder, which gives another perspective, another layer there, which is really good and really worthwhile. And so yeah, it's a good nerdy book. The front cover is beautiful. The artwork inside it, while limited, is really pretty as well. And I think it's a great little book for the whiskey lover in your life as well. So there's a couple that I absolutely stand by. Independent Scotch by David Stirk and A Passion for Whiskey by Ian Wisniewski.
Well, I'll tell you, the holidays are coming up, and so there'll be a bit of downtime, which is quite nice. So I think what I might do is actually take some quiet time during the day to read the Stirk book, because you're not the only person. There are people who've reached out to me saying, I just read the David Stirk book. Single Cask Nation is mentioned. Your name is mentioned specifically. I'm like, of course I have to read it. And so it's not on audiobook. And so I'm gonna do this not before bed, but actually midday with a nice cup of tea, maybe a little cheeky wee pour on the side as well.
Oh,
and
definitely a
give it a
cheeky
go.
wee pour. I'm sure there's a few David Stirk bottles on those shelves behind you.
Well, I was part of the Kickstarter with it, and it came with an electric coup bottling. It was a North British from a sherry cask, so that's what I'll be pouring with it.
There you go. That sounds perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah, fantastic. All right. So there you go. I just wanted to get those mentioned because it is the type of Is the type of year? No, it is the time of year when invariably people reach out and say, "Hey, you got any recommendations that I could either, get my partner or friends or what have you?" So there's a couple to get people going.
Beauty.
But onto the interview.
Yeah, I want to get over to that really quickly. Before I do, I've got a question to ask you. So here we are. You're speaking with the Ohnmacht sisters.
Indeed.
And we've had multiple times. We've had guests return to the podcast. Usually there's a year between. Or 2 years between. We're not even a year between these two conversations.
Yep.
And you said, I've got to bring these two back. So give us a quick synopsis as to why, and then let's get into it.
Yeah, when you and I kicked off 2023, and then we kicked off year 7, we said we wanted to talk more agriculture. We wanted to talk more environment. We wanted to talk more about the production of grain that ultimately becomes the whiskey that we enjoy so much. And with the Ohnmacht sisters, here we have almost the year in preview and the year in review, where when we had them on and the episode had dropped on International Women's Day back in March, when we spoke to them in March, they were just starting their year, just getting ready to put seed in the ground and look at fertilization plans and things like that. So it was just beginning. And they talked about some of the concerns that they had coming into the year. They thought they were facing drought conditions based on what they saw last year. Without saying too much, since listeners should go into the interview, they had a pretty difficult summer, a pretty difficult growing year, but not for the reasons they expected. And so we do get into the conversation a little bit. How do you do what you do when Mother Nature is one part of this and Mother Nature is becoming more unpredictable and more difficult to plan around? And so I threw in the towel on agriculture at one point in the interview. I was like, well, this isn't for me. This is never going to work. But the fact that they continue to return to it and they see ways forward was really telling. One other aspect of the conversation that we got into is new research surrounding regenerative farming.
Yeah.
And there's actually a counterpoint made in this interview to the interview we had posted back in March. Yeah. And that was really telling as well. Like these women are on the ground. They are learning day in and day out. They are adding more information and gaining new knowledge all the time. They're not stuck in their ways. They're not digging in their heels. They're embracing new ways to be successful and new ways that serve the environment and serve agriculture and serve the production of grain and serve distillers and serve consumers like us. And I applaud them. I was really excited. I do say in the very beginning of the interview that Felicia had actually reached out over email, maybe in October, and said, hey, we had a blast talking with you in the early part of the year. What would you think about us coming back on with an update? Yeah. And brilliant, absolutely brilliant. Let's press ahead with that. And that's what we did. And so easy conversation with them. We talked agriculture. We talked the Whiskey Sisters supply side of the business. We talked about whether they would ever want to get into malting or not. You can listen to how they answer that question, but they're really cracking. And then we talked about 2024 as well, and that's really fitting given the 2023 that they experienced. So.
There you go. Okay, well, let's leave it there and take it on to you and the Ohnmacht sisters.
Welcome back to the podcast, to the Ohnmacht sisters. Felicia, welcome back.
Hi.
Stephanie, welcome back. Lovely to see you both.
Hello, hello. It's good to see you too.
How have you both been?
It's been good. Lots of things have been going on that we can't wait to fill you guys in on.
Long time no speak. So, which is not a thing we say anymore. We had the privilege of your company, season 7, which is this season, episode 2. The episode dropped on International Women's Day on March 8. And we delivered a fantastic conversation unto the listeners of One Nation Under Whisky. And I am so excited, Felicia, that you wrote to me maybe a month or so ago. I can't quite remember how time works. And you said, would you like an update on how the year went? And I said, yes, that would be absolutely fantastic. And we made a schedule, and here we are, and today's the day.
Yep. It'll be exciting to tell you guys what's up.
So before we get to the year, can you remind our listeners where you are? You're on the Gergen farm. You farm the Gergen farm. Can you remind us where that is and kind of how that looks for you all?
So Stephanie and I kind of wear, just also to kind of give everyone an update, Stephanie and I wear 2 hats. We manage Gergen Farms, and then we have the company Whiskey Sister Supply, which was designed to help support our family farm, which is in eastern Colorado, specifically Burlington. And it is really close to Kansas. So we are growing in the high desert, and it's been great. And we've got a lot to discuss around what we're doing for the year and what we're looking at for next year, as well as, how this year went regarding weather and what we experienced.
So you say Colorado and you say high desert. Obviously, for people around the world, Colorado is the home of Rocky Mountains. How does that look for where you're situated in the state?
So we're so far away from the mountains. Go for it, Steph.
So we're on the eastern side of Colorado, so right on the Colorado-Kansas border. But at the high plains level, there's a good half of the state that can't see the mountains. So it's pretty shocking. It's flatlands, there's a few trees, but you can't see a tip of a mountain until you go about an hour west.
That is remarkable. It really goes to show the size of this country and the scale of this country, that you can be in a state that is known for literally the Rocky Mountains. Yeah. And yet you're an hour and a half drive before you start to see the tip of any mountain.
Yeah, and that's Pikes Peak. And so if you're lucky, and it has to be a really clear day to be able to even see the tip of Pikes Peak. So we're about 2 hours from Metro Denver, and where you obviously can see a lot of mountains. So it's in the high desert means that we are at a higher elevation. We're around a mile above sea level, so 5,200 and some odd feet, and we're dry. We're really, really dry, typically. So that's where the update comes in.
So when we spoke previously in the spring of the year, end of February, beginning of March, we were talking about drought, and we were talking about water access, and we were talking about the worries that you had for Gergen Farm growing there. Yeah. And what kind of season did you end up having?
So we are in a super El Nino. We're going to have another one this upcoming year as well. And so what that means is that we get a lot more moisture, and we get a lot of it really fast sometimes. We had a lot of snow this year, and our dad, who's, old-time farmer, was like, so we're going to have a really wet summer. If we have a really wet winter, we're going to have a really wet summer, which means bigger weather events. So bigger thunderstorms, potentially more damaging with hail, tornadoes, wind, etc. So
Okay.
I kept being like, yeah, sure, Dad. Okay. I was schooled this year by Mother Nature. Anyways, so basically between May and the end of July, we received 7 inches of rain. Typically, we only receive in the entire year 10 to 14 inches. So
Whoa.
there was a lot of moisture and rain that came in, which was a blessing and lovely and awesome. And we did not have to run our
Yeah.
sprinklers, and we could conserve water that way. But it came with what our father was expecting. And it took us some time to get some of our crops in the field too, because so in the winter, we had already planted wheat and rye when we talked to you guys. Those were already in the field. We plant those in September,
Okay.
October. Corn goes in.
How close to harvest at that point?
Harvest,
When we spoke.
we would have been harvest, we were in the middle of nothing at that point. So harvest for wheat and rye happened in July, and harvest for corn happens in October, November.
Wow, even from winter planting?
Yeah. It's because it's just our climate.
That's a much longer season.
Yeah, it's unlike, everything south of us. They'll plant more in the spring and still be able to harvest it. And their spring is earlier, right? When I think of spring, I think of March, April, May. They're thinking spring is like February, right? It's just a different climate.
We can still get snow until the end of April.
Yeah.
Wow.
So nothing really comes out. It doesn't really start to come back alive.
And a good snow at that point?
Oh, we've had a good snow in May. Mother's Day weekend. Mother's Day weekend is like our freeze date, our last freeze date, typically.
Okay. Which is true for us in Virginia here, in Northern Virginia.
Yeah, so you're probably a similar situation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, so corn goes in April. We put in kidney beans this year as well, a couple of circles of kidney beans for diversification. Not everything for us goes to whiskey at this point. We look forward to the day that everything does, but until then, it's diversification for the farm. And yeah, so everything was going great, and June 30th hit. So we woke up the morning of June 30th, and the rye and the wheat's beautiful, and the corn is up to chest high, or just everything's amazing. And my parents watched a storm roll in, and it was a 20-mile wide storm. And I feel like our dad said it was 150 miles long.
Holy
and
moly.
It destroyed everything in its path. We got golf balls. So the storm literally hit where our homestead is, and I'm showing this to Jason, but our homestead is like kind of in the middle, and the storm hit all north of the homestead, and then the fields south, which are only 5 fields south of it. Everything north was completely destroyed. So chest high corn was destroyed down to 5 inches stubs.
Oh my gosh.
And it wiped out everything in that whole 20-mile, 150-mile. And it saved a lot of the whiskey product. So the whiskey corn was saved.
Let me breathe a sigh of relief, selfishly. and so you're saying maybe half the harvest was lost, or half the crop was lost?
Half the crop was lost.
What kind of quantity are we talking there?
Oh Lord.
Is it best not to say these numbers out loud?
Corn. So,
or just size of field, or number of fields.
So we have 11 circles. So 6. It ended up being 6 circles of crop, and 400 acres of dry land, all gone.
And so that circle's 120 acres.
Oh my gosh. 400 acres
just
of
dry land.
Dry land. That
doesn't even a pivot.
Circle. Yeah, that's
so a pivot for everybody. And in different parts of the world, irrigate completely different. It just depends on your region. People do flood irrigating. But they're for us because we pull out of the Ogallala Aquifer. I think we talked about last time. We have these pivots. And when you're flying over the United States, if you look down, you'll see big circles. That is, when I say a circle, ours are 120 acres in those circles. Sometimes the circles are bigger, sometimes they're larger. But for us, they're 120 acres. And there's a sprinkler that plops down right in the middle. It's called the pivot. And it just goes around in a circle watering. So we had 620 acre circles gone. No more. Over.
Oh my gosh. And it's six times 120 acres, not even 620 acres. It's 6 times 120. This is mind boggling. That sounds like a disaster.
It's a disaster. And our grandmother, Rosemary, used to always say, this is why you have insurance. So we definitely had insurance, which was good. It's, it keeps keeps the farm afloat. But how do we pivot? So at that point, Gergen Farms had okay, we have insurance. Hopefully we survive. We replanted one of the kidney bean circles because we had time. But the rest of it was gone. So Gergen Farms, I'm going, lots of cuss words, right? Take that hat off. I'm literally taking videos in the field with Steph being like, what do we do? Whisky Sisters hat comes on. What do we do?
Oh my gosh.
So, Steph, I don't know if you want to talk to that.
A big lesson. That was a big lesson in diversification geographically. And we thought we were brilliant because we'd already signed some agreements with farmers an hour north of us in case something like this would happen, because we only have, even though we have 11 circles, it's still not enough to meet all the diversification of the crops we're growing.
Wow.
So we need X amount of rye, we need X amount of corn, we need X amount of wheat, but you can't typically you don't put the same crop on the same circle year after year because every crop takes a different nutrients and deposits different nutrients back into the soil.
Sure.
So you rotate all those crops. So when you need X amount of circles of rye and X amount of corn for your distilleries, you do still need to kind of diversify outside to make sure you got it covered. So we thought we were good. And even the farmers an hour north of us were part of the same storm.
An hour?
Yeah.
Oh my, okay, that speaks to the size of what came through.
Yeah.
This is a real naive question from a city slicker, but do you look at that half that's gone and then once again pivot to that half that's there and say, how the hell did this half survive? Right? It seems like you had a disaster on your hands that could have been twice as much a disaster as it was. Do you have that in the moment, or are you still looking at the half that's no more?
Yeah, well, for me, I think I had some tears. Stephanie and I talked to each other like, what the F are we doing with our lives? Going and working corporate just seems so much easier right now. And yeah, you question your life decisions. But you, like all farmers, if you are called to do this, and you feel like you're meant to do this, you pivot. Like you think, our mom, I think we talked about this last time, they're very Catholic. Mom was lighting candles and praying and being thankful for what we have. And we, kind of followed suit and did the same, and you pivot and you just make it work.
Well, and one thing is, we grew up, this wasn't the first time we've been hailed out. It was the first time since we've had the grain to distillery business running. But we grew up with these storms happening. So you wake up the next morning, you put your boots on, and you go and you fix it, or you solve for it, or you make the next best decision that you can make given the situation you're in. I think had Felicia and I started this without that background, and then trying to do a farm in our 40s, and then being like, well, that was stupid. I guess that's the last time we ever do that. Probably be in a different position. But you just wake up and you figure it out, and you just go forward.
Oh my gosh. But just for the benefit of our listeners, and if you don't mind the question, you get to say that's what we've got insurance for, but is insurance covering your bare minimum losses? Insurance isn't giving you a profitable year, I assume. It just allows you to keep going into the next year. Am I thinking of that correctly?
Yeah. And we also experienced it because it happened so early in the season. It happened in June. We had just laid down a 6-figure amount in fertilizer, if I remember right. Like 3 days before. But it
laid it down into the soil.
We sprayed some fertilizer. Anywho, it covers, but then you have to remember you don't have inputs after that. So I'm not paying for the electricity for those sprinklers, the water coming out. I'm not paying for if we get bugs, or I'm not paying for harvest, right? The harvest crew to come in. So your inputs obviously go away unless you choose to replant. Yeah. So that helps. That helps the bottom line.
But it hurt because given all the rain we'd received up to that point, we didn't have to use the sprinklers. We'd been able to just let Mother Nature take care of it. And it was the rye and the wheat was tall. It was lush. So it was going to be, record year in terms of what we were going to make. And then it wasn't the record year anymore.
It's a record year in something.
You talk about that. You just get up the next day and you put on your boots and you go out to the fields. Do you allow yourself a mourning period? Is there still a bit of you in mourning?
Oh, I totally have. I mean, we're still dealing with pivoting and trying to get rye sourced within the state of Colorado, and having conversations with clients that are like, we have this, that, we had the one circle of rye. We have this in Colorado. This is all we got. There's some other clients that are larger that we had to be like, so yeah, I can get it for you regionally. So how much does it matter that it comes from the state of Colorado?
Wow.
And they had to also have a moment, right, to figure out, is it okay? And, made the decisions that they made. So it was quite the year.
And one thing about the grieving period, after the hail hits, you go out that night if you can, or you go out the next morning, and there's a chance that it will recover, especially the corn. Yeah. Okay. The corn was maybe young enough.
Paul and Norbert were like, well, maybe.
So then you're like, let's wait a week. Let's wait 2 weeks. Let's see if the plant... Now, of course, the wheat and rye were gone because we were a couple of weeks from harvest. But the corn, will it turn around? Did the hail? Yes, it may be short, but did it get the brains of the plant? Did that get damaged, or can it recover?
Oh, okay.
And so there was a good period of time where we're waiting to see if the plant recovered or not. So it's not like, oh, it's done, because you have experts come out, agronomists, and they're like, well, that may not be too bad. There's a chance that may, and then you have to debate, we got to hurry up and plow that under to put another crop in, or do we hope it wasn't damaged as bad as it looked?
Yeah.
And we go from there.
Did you have any successes coming out of that deliberation?
It all got destroyed.
So no.
No.
There was hope. I'm such a hopeful person.
And I was out there like with Paulette, our mom, looking at it, and you can see like bruising on the stand of the corn stalk at the very bottom, and you're like, yeah. And if we were to keep growing it, a wind event is going to come and just knock it straight down. So
yeah,
I think you're just kind of you're stuck, and I always say farmers are on a hero's journey every year.
Yeah, and
they figure it out every single year. We had a friend that was 10 miles west of us that got hailed out 3 different times this year. He first time hail out, he was like, I'm going to go replant, because it was still time that you could replant corn and do a short season corn. It got up to knee high, got hailed out. And then I don't think he had done anything. He was probably getting he still had some corn. He may have still had a few areas of corn that hadn't gotten hailed out. Well, they got hailed out then in August. Like the guy just got completely wiped over 3 different times this year. And so you question your life decisions as a farmer. But the thing is he'll get back up tomorrow, and like $5 the guy has wheat planted this year. It already's in.
Because goodness knows what the future looks like.
Yeah,
That's
this is what my life is.
remarkable. It's so interesting to me that there are multiple half full, half empty glasses in play here. Like, I'm reeling from you losing half your crop and asking you, well, what about the other half? And Stephanie's talking about it might rebound if we cross our fingers hard enough and light enough candles, but and then over here, you've 10 miles away, you've got a farmer hailed out 3 times who gets up every day. Like, so you didn't get hailed out an additional 2 times. No. That's good.
Look at that.
We're winning.
So you sit there and you're like, has anyone checked on him? Like, after the 3rd time, I was like, okay, he's got friends that are walking over and knocking on his door, right? Being like, you okay? Let's hear some whiskey. Let's sit down. Wow. I know it's 10 o'clock in the morning, but I think we need to sit down and have a little glass.
Wow. I also do like hearing from you both that when it hits, you have that moment of hope. You also have that moment of putting on your boots. But then you're immediately saying, okay, what do we do with this? Where do we go? If you've got people in need of supply, how do we get supply? Let's get on the phones. Yeah. Like, the fact there's something to be done doesn't make up for what you've just lost and the heartache of all of that. But having a project to throw yourselves into and still see successes, it sounds very human in how we exist as humans when the world just keeps slapping us down.
Like, I kind of wanted to hide in bed a few times. I was like, I don't know if I'm going to get out today. But, I hear Paulette's voice in my head. You got to get up and keep going. It'll turn around. Okay.
She would love to know you're quoting her in your head.
Oh, she's going to listen to this and die laughing.
Your mom has won at that point when she's in your head. So.
Yeah.
And so please, on the, I love that little story you're starting to tease out there where you're making a call to somebody who Whisky Sisters are supplying to say, look, this Mother Nature here has gone in a different direction. What did it end up looking like for Whisky Sisters supply across the board, Stephanie?
Well, because really this harvest, what we just missed in harvest will supply us all the way starting to July next year. So we have, really, we're digging in and supporting and reaching out to our network of farmers. And one thing that has been helpful is Felicia's really dug into the regenerative farming programs. And in that, we're finding, more and more farmers that are geographically dispersed away from our area, which is helping us find outlets to find other grains that are also being grown with the same kind of mindset where we are at, which is healthy soils, great water management, and fertilizer management. So I don't know, Felicia, if you want to share a little bit about what you've learned on the regen side and what that means for Colorado farmers versus farmers in other parts of the country.
So last time we talked, we were unsure that would even work. And I had talked to, people that were farming our land, not just our farming partner, but other people that had been around our area and know our soils specific to, because soils change within even just small geographic regions. And they were like, yeah, that's going to steal your water. So, I kept this particular company kept coming up in multiple conversations with different areas. It was kind of like this universal, like, you need to hone in on this. The owner of it, his name is Gabe Brown. So if anyone wants to look at it from, any of your readers or listeners, look up Gabe Brown. He has a really cool story. Almost lost his farm about 20 years ago and was trying to save it and totally changed up how he was farming. And he's big ag. You can consider us big ag a little bit. And
where was he?
He's in North Dakota. So similar kind of environment, similar water. They may get a few more inches a year than we do typically. But has a good idea on what can happen. And he kind of went his own direction with regenerative and his kind of perspectives in looking at it from a larger acreage perspective.
Okay.
We sat just like 2 weeks ago, we sat with one of their agronomists and with my farming partner, who I drugged to this meeting. He was like, I don't think so. I'm like, just get on the call. And he walked away with, oh, I think we can do this. So what they're learning, there's all this new science. So our farming partner went to Colorado State University. He learned about agronomy through all of his time. You know, he's been farming for 25 years. And it's always been said you can't have cover crops in our area because it's going to steal the moisture away. So what they're learning and the studies that they're finding, and I think some of this is through the Land Institute in Kansas, is it comes back to not necessarily the crop, the cover crops, you know, taking up water because it needs to grow. You end up saving water with the canopy of the crop. So, you know, corn, they call it the canopy, those big leaves. That's all canopy.
Yeah.
And so when the cover crop's tiny, you have this canopy over it, and it helps reduce evaporation out of the soil. What they're finding is it does keep moisture in when you have a canopy. Us being no-till was already like, he's like, I didn't have to convince you to no-till. That's amazing, because most farmers are like, I'm not no-tilling, because you need, you know, they think that they have to prepare the soil for planting, and they're finding that no, you don't, and you don't have to at all. So we no-till, but it's not leaving the stalks out there from the previous harvest isn't enough to keep the moisture in. Mm-hmm. So planting a cover crop, that canopy will help keep the moisture in. And plus, we don't have the same amount of organic matter in our soils like Iowa, Kentucky, or where you're at in Virginia. You guys just have a lot of organic matter, so it holds all that moisture a lot easier. Over time, those roots, you know, as you're continuing to, you know, that's going in some way and breaking down, those roots are creating more organic matter, which then in turn holds the moisture. So we are actually doing a lot of learning about it. Our farming partner is going to a special conference in Wichita in January to learn even more. And I'm hoping that we are going to be, so the same guy created this regenerative certification process called Regen. Maker's Mark is using it. So for a bigger name to understand, like Maker's Mark is actually Regen certified to level 2. It goes up to level 5. And we're going to hopefully have some Regen certification possibly starting in the fall. We've got to take the next months to figure out what we're doing. But it really involves a reduction of nitrogen and a reduction of phosphorus. And then the introduction of cover crops and using some cattle. I don't want to have, I don't want to be growing my own cattle. We've got enough going on with Whisky Sisters. Like, I don't need to throw livestock into the mix. But in Talkington, there's ways around that and ways to figure that out, and working with other people just to graze it, because it's really important to have cattle. They leave their poop and, you know, stomp around on things and mix things up and whatever. But yeah, so we're hoping to have a plan of how we're going to do it by fall at the Gergen Farms. And then,
Just very quickly, when we were talking previously, you had talked about leaving up the corn but not having need for the cover crop as a nitrogen fixer, because you had enough nitrogen, you had enough fertilizer in your soil. You had talked previously about cattle coming through and excrement and obviously clumping it up with their hooves and all that malarkey. It's interesting in listening to you about the need for the canopy. I may have mentioned it in our last interview as well, but we have a small residential vegetable garden, and my wife farms. And for the last couple of years, we've used the Three Sisters method, the Native American, right? And so you plant your corn first, it grows, has broad leaves. You plant your
Mm-hmm.
beans. Your beans come in behind. Use the corn
Yep.
as a climber, and then once your beans are established, you bring in your squash, and then your squash gets to grow because it's protected by the two
Yeah.
layers above it. It's so wonderful to hear, indigenous techniques that we circle back around
Yeah.
to, and there's a way it works and a reason that it was the practice. And as Europeans, I feel like we came over to this country and said, nope, none of that. This is how we do it.
We colonized the hell out of it. Yeah.
There you go.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, we're, like I said, we want to be good stewards, and this is just one of the ways. And we hope, as we learn more and more, that we just continue to become better. And we start small. No farmer's going to want to do the whole farm right away because it may not work. So, we choose whatever circles, and then we kind of go from there.
So what does that look like as experimentation? You've got suppliers who are getting phone calls from you and you say, sorry, didn't work out. But you've also got phone calls that you're having with people who say, I'd be interested in, or maybe you lead the conversation, right? Would you be interested in trying X, Y, and Z? How easily does experimentation fit into what's already an incredibly difficult business?
It's really hard, especially when you have 120 acre circle. You don't have something small to experiment with.
Yeah.
We are thankfully getting to experiment with different varieties of rye. So we can do, not only we were experimenting with regenerative, and we'll do like 3 circles and see what happens. That is definitely doable. And then we start to experiment with different varieties too.
When we keep hearing the word regenerative, is this a new word for organic? Is this a different word than organic? Is this a different process than organic? Is this a different process than anything else? I haven't heard regenerative before, but we're talking about things that we have talked about before. Is there an avoidance of organic because of some of the forms that's taken? Is this just kind of a stewardship model for land? Do you have any sense of that?
That's a really good question. I see it as, I think your last statement of it's a stewardship model. Going organic is a humongous process, and the market for it is very small, right? You have to be a certain demographic to be able to afford such things, or
sure.
Right, or you're really making it a priority in your budgets to be able to handle, because it's just going to be more expensive, because it's more expensive to do. Now, organic doesn't mean lack of fertilizer, lack of pesticides. It's just different. Correct. And those can be more expensive for the grower to buy. Therefore, your product's more expensive, and it doesn't yield as well. So regenerative, it's a stewardship. It's helping keep our soils where they need to be. It's trying to bring them back from maybe, some people would be like, we've stripped our soils of all things nutrients, right? I don't 100% believe that, but you will hear that in a regenerative kind of world. We've stripped everything. I think farmers have worked really hard to be good stewards this entire time. And have we maybe stripped some of it? Maybe, depending on the farmer and the farmer practice. But I think in general, people have worked really hard to keep things good. This just makes an additional way of doing things, making it better and not so reliant on the fertilizer industry, which fertilizer companies are going to hate to hear this.
Heard loud and clear.
Well, but we saw when we were dealing with the war in Ukraine and Russia, we still are, but the fertilizer prices went through the roof because that's where a lot of it's produced. And so, again, grain prices went up as well with that, but it hurt the farmers, even though there were high grain
really
prices.
High inputs that year. It was awful. I'm seeing about half my input costs outside of us getting hailed out. Input costs for certain items are half of what they were when the war started.
So input costs are half.
So like
to my ear, that sounds like good news, but
Yeah.
I doubt it can be good news because you're in agriculture. This is
Yeah.
good news?
No, it's good news, but at the same time, we were dealing with $7 corn, sometimes $8 corn, because people were playing the market because they were so scared of what was happening over there. And then now that that's settled out, so we're half of our fertilizer market, but then the price of corn is $5.10 a bushel compared to 8 2 years ago. So we're at the mercy of people playing the market or global happenings. I was actually, when the Middle East with Israel and Hamas went on, I was like, what's going to go on with the markets? And I was shocked. Nothing. I mean, it dropped. We were down to like $4.85, $4.50 at one point.
The price of your corn dropped again. Oh my gosh. Does it go on, Stephanie?
And the cost, and Felicia, you probably looked at the latest analysis on this. It's about $5 to produce a bushel of corn.
Jason hangs head.
So we're back underwater.
If we're using traditional markets, right? So when you drink your whiskey, yes, you want your inexpensive, inflation is awful right now. The cost of groceries is ridiculous.
Yes.
We all know the whiskey in the bourbon market is not doing well because of, all the things. But know that can you start drinking again? It's affecting our farmers. That's awful. Like, be sober if that's what you need to do. But it is affecting downstream our agriculture.
Yeah. Which is one of those things. Josh and I just put out an episode where we each picked 5 American spirits. And one of the ones for me is the Heaven Hill 7-year-old bottled in bond. And I won't belabor the point. Our listeners know this very well. But it used to be a 6-year-old bottled in bond available in Kentucky that was $15 a bottle, $15 a bottle. And it went off the market. They are both Ohnmacht sisters are making a face.
I'm sitting here with
what is happening right now?
How are those farmers making it?
Right. And so that bottle got discontinued maybe 2017. And then it went away for a year and it came back as a 7-year-old and it was $40 a bottle, 40. And as a consumer, a lot of us, myself included, you just went from 15 to 40. Like, no, I'm not doing that. And the reason I'm telling you this today is in our episode of picking selections, we said $15 was too cheap for that. That was an artificially deflated price for a bottle of whiskey. We should be paying meaningful amounts of money for bottles of whiskey. And so we also had a black button on there that might come in more like $70, $75, $80 a bottle. We had Westland on there, 100% malted barley that might come in around $70 a bottle, right? To your point, Felicia, there are people behind every step of this. There are people distilling this and warehousing this. There are people mashing this. There are people growing this and harvesting this. We need to remember that there are people in every single part of this. And as much as the environment is hugely important, and I've had pleasure discussing that with you across 2 interviews, the people are hugely important as well. And we need to support all the people in there.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And farmers are doing whatever they can to take care of things and then survive on top of it. You can't lose the farm in order to save this is going to sound awful. You have to balance, being the best steward and not losing the farm at the same time.
And that's where I wondered if that's where we're going with maybe the word regenerative instead of the word organic. Or organic can sometimes sound a little holier than thou. Yeah. Whereas as someone who tries to buy organic when he can and is vegetarian and has a suburban vegetable garden, like I'm as crunchy as they come. I still understand there are demands being placed upon farmers that we can't be jejune, we can't be naive about what it takes to bring the food to our table, nor at the same time can we destroy the land in the name of bringing food to our table?
Yeah.
Neither one of those, but dichotomies are bad. I think we're coming to realize that.
It's a both and situation. So how do you do both and continue to keep? Because we all don't want humongous companies buying all the land. I mean, China's coming over to buy land. I think there's some legislation around that now where they can't do that. But two big corporations just sold a bunch of land in Burlington for whatever reason. I'm not sure, but they just sold a bunch of land. And so, which is fine because some local farmers bought it. There's a huge company out of Connecticut, investment company, that bought a bunch of it.
Oh, right.
So, okay. I completely understand from the investment perspective. I bet you're making great money.
Well, there's only so much land in the world. And so, as the population grows, land is king.
So
it makes sense. But it's harder for the small farmers to beat out big corporations when it comes to buying land and growing your business.
Well, and on that very front, given the circles that the two of you move in, do you feel like, and maybe we're preaching to the choir, and maybe we're always talking to the same type of person, but are you feeling like more farmers want to have this conversation about regenerative, I have such a hard time saying that word, about regenerative growth, or is it, listen, this business is difficult enough, I'm just going to keep my head down and do it the way we've been doing it and hope that next year is better than this year? What does that sound like for you when you're out and about and having conversations?
I think they're curious, but they're going to wait for another farmer to do it first.
Well said.
It's a risk.
Yeah.
Because they are, I mean, in regenerative, you talk about your bushels decreasing, but then your inputs decrease. So you kind of supposedly come out even in the end. I mean, they're all willing to, but it can't be hard, right? And it can't be snake oil.
Yes.
You can't be trying to sell me some new fangled fertilizer way of doing things. It has, like, that was our farming partner's first thing was like, if they're trying to sell me some new chemical or whatever, he's like, I'm out.
Yeah.
And they weren't. They were just like, this is what it looks like. And he was like, I'm there for it.
Wow.
And hopefully, right, we will have the data, right? We will know what the soil looked like and how we produced in our conventional, when we weren't 100% conventional. I mean, we weren't tilling and stuff, but where we started. And then again, we'll see even where 1 year takes us or 2 years in terms of what does the soil look like? What's our yield look like at the harvest? And so we'll start to have data to prove out how this looks and where it's going and is it worth it.
Well, and then to bring it back to whiskey, right? Let's start heading down the whiskey path. How is this going to affect the grain, right? Because grain's just not grain.
Exactly, yeah.
I will die on the hill that grain is just not grain. I might burn me on the stake there, but that's where I'm going. And when we start putting these into play, right? We know nitrogen affects flavor. We know in proteins. So nitrogen affects protein. Proteins affects flavor. It also affects how it is in the still. Like, are you going to have problems with it boiling over? All the things. Your yields. Are they not going to be able to, put it down as many barrels because of the proteins? But there's all these other bits of data that we're learning about. There's some stuff that I learned about yesterday that will start to go into play and how it affects for the whiskey industry. It's not just going to cattle or downstream to some food source. This is how is this grown for the whiskey industry, and what will a regenerative do for that grain for the whiskey industry?
And dot.
I don't know.
What did you learn yesterday?
What did I learn yesterday? So in other areas of the country have to think about this, but because we're so dry, typically, never been a problem. It's pre-germination. So when you're in a more moist area, such as like Kentucky, Maryland, Iowa, this is something you would have to think about. It's pre-germ. So the crop is still in the field. If there's a lot of moisture and the plant has died and we can't get in there to harvest it for whatever reason, that grain will start to pre-germinate. So for a malting perspective, the maltsters are going to be like, it's already germinating, I can't use it. It has to be a certain level, alive. The grain has to be alive, but not actually working on anything. So it becomes a problem for malting. And then we're not sure if it's going to become in the rye a problem for distilling, like just raw. There's a lot of studies around barley around this particular test. Lots of studies. Barley's tested. Scotland, I'm sure, has tested all the things around barley, right? But here, because they've considered rye is just rye and wheat is just wheat, maybe not in small distilleries, but in general, the industry, these items haven't been studied. So we don't know if this is going to be a long-term problem in the still. Is this going to be an issue? It may not be an issue at all, but they may see potentially some starch conversion issues in the still. They may not. There's just not a lot of information. We know that the rye starches and sugars are different than the barley starches and sugars. So will there be a problem because we've only ever studied barley? We don't know. So I want, I have a dream, and I've told Steph this dream a while back. I want to do more studying around rye, I think, or even wheat, just other grains that go into the distilling world. I think we can learn a lot more information so all distilleries can be a lot more efficient in how they use the grain.
Which sets me up for a two-parter with Stephanie, which starts with you, Felicia. So in our last interview, you, Felicia, were talking about Far North Spirits rye study. And then maybe a series of ryes that you tasted through new make. They tasted through new make, and there were obviously differences between them. In our last interview, in our last conversation, we talked about terroir a little bit and kind of the value of this. And one of the things we kind of got into was from that grain all the way to that finished, distilled, matured spirit. The farther you got away from the grain, the farther you got away from that unique flavour of that grain. But grain is not just grain. There are still differences being made. And you, Felicia, made a point that really stuck with me, which was vintages, even in whiskey, could very well start to mean something based on different growing conditions from year to year. And so I'm curious, coming out of this difficult year that's been had and being hailed out in conditions and what have you, what do you think might come from the grain that was harvested and sold this year? What might a 2023 vintage look like?
I'm curious. So the one thing from a test data perspective is our proteins were lower in our Elbin. The one circle that survived, our proteins were a lot lower. We know that will give people more product out of the still and potentially less flavor. Now, was it because we got more moisture, so it took some of that flavor away? Or was it because we did not put down that last round of fertilizer that most people do? So we busheled less, but potentially for the distilleries, they will be able to get more spirit out. We don't know. I'm anxious to see where this one goes and kind of test that out. We did the same thing in our specialty wheat. Didn't have the same kind of success and compared to someone who grew the exact same wheat just for the elevator. So I don't know. I do wonder if it's going to be a little bit more watered down, for lack of a better word. And it was Elbin. So Elbin is very spice forward and can come across like cinnamon bear compared to like a Hazlitt or a Bono or Bono. I think I always don't know if it's Bono or Bono. Are we going to honor you two or are we going to not?
I just love it when you throw around these varietals like they're the names of your children. You're just like, oh yeah, that one brings this to the table, and that one brings this other thing to the table. I love it. It's so cool.
And and Bono's going away. They're discontinuing it. So I know
Bono
product.
would go away for years.
I don't look at you two. You'll never go away. But um, it's going away. So these people have created their flavor profiles. So it's a proprietary hybrid rye, and they're discontinuing it.
Interesting.
Yeah, and so
people have built on it are losing that flavor.
Yeah, which then people want to go to the open pollinated rye, which aren't managed and controlled. They're like more of an heritage or an heirloom, but they're a little bit harder to grow, and you may not get as much bushel. But from a farming perspective, not as great. But you're going to get maybe different flavors. It's more nuanced.
Gotcha.
So all these things that we could study. Yes, Steph.
Well, no, I think at the end of the day, as a consumer of whiskey, you'll always, when it comes down to batch form, like if you're buying either small batch, which I even think small batch gets blended out a bit, but when you're buying a single barrel release, and they know the dates on, how long it aged, you can kind of go back and begin to maybe taste the difference. But again, to your other point, how much of it's grain and how much is it maturation? Because this year, while it was wet, it wasn't as hot in Colorado, the barrels aging in those conditions weren't under the same stress that they're normally under during a summer. Yeah. So now you've got two different factors playing in. You got the weather that impacted the grain, but you also have the weather impacting the maturation in the barrel. And how did the two of them play out? And then how do you, as a consumer, actually taste it? And if it's getting blended out with 50 barrels per batch, or is it 1 barrel or 2 barrels, you might be able to taste the difference a little bit more.
So it seems like what we're discussing is a bit of a moving target, but it also seems like it's worth us having these conversations because they might feed back into practices that might feed back into supporting individuals on a farm. Like I know on one hand we get very geeky about terroir, and we did in our last interview. Is it there? Is it not there? How close can we get to it? But there are differences, right? Grain isn't just grain, as Felicia says. And so why shouldn't we have these conversations, right? Why shouldn't we get into like, is that the cask? Is that the metal warehouse in the Texas heat? Like, I just think that could be kind of fun. And the consistency of a big name brand isn't interesting to me. It isn't exciting to me. I like getting in the weeds, right?
I do too.
And so I appreciate you two having that conversation.
I know Independent Stave, I don't know if I talked about this last time, but Independent Stave is doing a study where they did the exact same booze spread in, I don't know how many barrels they filled. I think they got them filled all at the same place, all at the exact same time. And then they shipped them to different parts of the world to mature.
Oh, gosh.
And so this is something we learned at Bourbon Women's Association in 2022. So I don't know where they're at now, but they only allowed us to see Scotland versus Texas. And the circles, I don't know if you've ever seen like how they do their circle for flavor within the barrel and like the different compounds that come out.
Okay.
Completely different product coming out. Yeah.
Right. An extractive process that is climate condition specific. Yep. Wow.
Yeah.
That's very cool. Yeah, I don't think you mentioned that in the last interview.
Yeah, super fun.
Wow. Okay, try not to let my mind race.
Yeah, don't let your brain explode. And then you throw grain on top of that. Like, it's just...
Right?
Yeah.
Well, and then even grain, and then what's going on in the air, right? Are we having smoky conditions with the fires? Right. Are we having other things? Even when you open air ferment, where are you in the season, Mother Nature season? What pollens are floating in the air that actually get into the open air ferment? Or some of those things make a difference too. If you are fermenting that batch in the spring when you've got a lot of pollen in the air versus in the winter when there's no pollen in the air.
Yeah. Sorry, you can tell Jason's brain is racing when he just goes into one word. Yeah, go on, oh my God, my brain hurts.
As you lay in bed tonight going, how's that working?
So as two people who are are perpetually in the optimism business, while life, the universe, and everything sends trials and tribulations your way. As you look towards 24, you've obviously got a Gergen farm hat, and you've obviously got a Whisky Sisters supply hat. What do you see as you look into that crystal ball for 2024, and how do you plan for 2024, given what you've seen in 23 and 22 and all these changing conditions?
So I'll take Gergen if you take whiskey stuff. So Gergen
For 100 or for, I'll take Gergen Farms for 100.
What is Gergen Farms in 2024?
What is a tornado?
And let's not go. No,
I'll take a tornado over a hailstorm.
as long as it. No, well,
Is
I
that
guess we have to
true?
remove the
It doesn't
roof
hit the farm.
of the homestead house so we can get a new roof. But other than that,
Insurance to the rescue again.
insurance to the rescue again. So we are actually, working with a larger network of farmers within Colorado to, like we said earlier, to compensate for that and making sure our clients are good. But for Gergen Farms, we're going to get a little bit more hail insurance. We're going to keep an eye on, how much moisture we get this winter, following our dad's. Like, if we get a lot of moisture in the winter, it's coming in the summer again. And
There you go.
So,
What does a dry winter mean?
you're going to still be dry. You're just going to be drought.
Okay, so dry equals dry, wet
dry
equals
equals
I think
dry,
I can
yep.
remember this.
And we were putting down a couple circles of Hazlitt rye because people are really liking it. And we've got some contracted over with some Elbin and some Serafino as well. So we're looking at more varieties. Sorry, that's whiskey. But Gergen, couple circles of wheat, a couple circles of kidney beans, and then just learning about regenerative and starting to figure out how we can start to implement it, what pieces of the property we will implement with it first, and working on our partnerships, because it does affect some of the partnerships that we have built out there if we do this. So,
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I
Oh,
mean,
okay.
our fertilizer company's not going to be happy.
Well, which is interesting because I think towards the tail end of our last interview, you were talking about even having tractors that can read nitrogen in soil and how that affected how you fertilized.
Yep.
And it seems like over the course of this summer and into this fall, you've taken a further step back from fertilization. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I think we're gonna still look at the variable rate. We're waiting on some yield maps to learn how it worked on the fields that survived, and seeing if it really helped. And then, one step further on that to potentially back it up even more.
Okay.
The regenerative soil testing is a lot more extensive, and we'll just see what comes from it. But the point is to only put on what the plant needs and what your soil needs, and that's
Gotcha.
it. Not overdoing it.
In your mention, which is wonderful to hear in terms of runoff and protecting the soil, et cetera, et cetera. When you're mentioning kidney beans here, are the kidney beans your canopy crop, or do you have a canopy crop separate from your kidney beans?
The canopy crop will be separate. We'll be putting down in next fall. We'll be probably putting down some cover crop
Okay.
and going from there. But it's all still a lot to learn, and so we'll just learn as we go. So it'll be a little bit more traditional this year, and then putting down rye and wheat may look different for 2024. Or will, not may. It will look different.
Declarative statement. I like it.
Yeah.
And then Stephanie, the Whiskey Sister Supply side for 24. How's that looking for you?
Well, I'm very, very nervous because we're going to be in an super El Nino year again.
Oh boy.
So for me is how do we operate a business where our clients can trust and know that they'll still be able to get their grain 24/7 into the following year. So a couple of different things. We talked about it briefly, I think, earlier today, which was how do we do more geographic diversity within the state of Colorado.
Yeah.
So We know we're in a hail path, most likely the same hail path this next year. So where do we contract out? And know we have farmers further than an hour away. So we can account for large storms that we weren't accounting for this year. And then the other exciting thing is because we have started to grow the network. We're learning, we're meeting these regenerative farmers and our clients. We're getting more and more contacts from outside of the state of Colorado for grains that are grown in their home state. We have been able to now begin conversations, and the goal will be to be delivering grain from a Utah farmer to our Utah distillery, from our Kentucky farmer to our to distilleries in Kentucky, Texas distilleries using Texas farmers. So we're in the process right now of just expanding state by state our network of farmers that can serve distilleries, and in that, do they still apply the same kind of farming practices that we support and that we know works well for a distiller. So it's a partnership and a collaboration together. This is what we need to grow to meet the needs. And we've been finding some really amazing farmers along the way in this journey. So super excited.
Oh, that's so cool.
To be not just Colorado grain based, but multiple states with different growing seasons and different issues and all the. So, hopefully we don't have four states with hail out. Put Felicia and I into the insane asylum if that were to happen. But really excited about.
So our passion is connecting. Our passion is connecting those distillers to farmers and vice versa, and giving the distillers some, back to grain is just not grain, and they can go, oh, this is the kind of wheat varietal I want to put in, and this is the kind of corn varietal or rye varietal. And giving everybody options and creating that partnership. So not only the farmers thrive, but the distilleries thrive as well.
Oh, that's wonderful. As soon
kind
as
of
you
our
start
jam.
talking collaborations, right? Collaborations are absolutely where it's at. And if we're going to talk about the people who exist within this chain of industry, whether it's a large I or a small I, the people are hugely important, and then the practices with the environment are hugely important. So I'm glad you're partnering with like-minded individuals.
Yeah.
I have to say to both of you that I love speaking with you because the honesty and the transparency that you bring to this is exactly what we need. And if we're having this conversation and our listeners are going out and having these conversations, and the producers from whom they're buying, if they're having conversations with them, that's what grows this meaningful work that hopefully we're engaged in and seeing some successes. So I'm going to learn from the two of you. I'm going to put my optimist hat on, and I'm going to see the glass as half full. And I wish you both continued success, and I look forward to the next time that we get to speak with you both.
Yeah, agreed. We'd love to. Thank you for having us on again.
A pleasure. Cheers. Be well.
Cheers to you too.
Cheers.
What an absolute brilliant conversation with those two. I'm kicking myself now for a second time, not being able to be a part of it. But, the whole time when they're talking about, dealing with Mother Nature, it almost sounded like Mother Nature-in-law. Right? And the cover, the relationship it's a little strained, right?
If my mother-in-law's listening, I love my mother-in-law. She treats me so well. If that's how the environment was, we'd all be in a better place.
I don't have a mother-in-law to.
There you go.
So that's how I was able to tell that joke. Yeah.
That's it. That's why you can get away with it. But in listening to them, right, you're out in the elements. You plant to the best of your ability. You fertilize to the best of your ability, and then a hailstorm can destroy hundreds of acres. Like I would have a much harder time. You hear them talk about just putting on their big girl pants, right? Their words, right? You got to go back out into the field, and you just do it. You just keep pushing forward. I grew up in an agricultural community. I currently live in an agricultural community. I have never been a farmer. I have never been involved in agricultural production. And I absolutely take my hat off to those who go out day in and day out. And sometimes it works brilliantly. And sometimes it breaks your soul.
Yeah.
Power to them.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, there you go. Thanks again to you.
Yeah,
to the
cheers.
Ohnmacht
Cheers.
sisters.
Nah, they're a lovely, lovely couple of women, and just speaking to them and seeing their passion and hearing their passion, and as I suggested as we were going into the interview, they don't want to move into mashing, or malting, I should say. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
They don't want to move into malting. They want to be growers. They want to be suppliers. They want relationships with other growers to help them supply.
Yeah.
Like it's really fascinating for me when I meet somebody who knows what they want to do, who sees what they want to achieve, and they don't have half an eye on that other thing.
Yeah.
They're laser focused on doing the thing they want to do. So there's no doubt we will be talking to them again in the future. They're going to get up there in Mark Watt numbers of visits and Dave Broom numbers of visits. They're really doing something. And 24 for them could look nothing like 23,
Right.
which looks nothing like 22.
Yeah.
What kind of world is that to be operating in? So I tip the cap to them. I wish them nothing but the best, and I'm excited for the next time. And I tell you what, Joshua, we'll make sure the schedule allows you to join in the conversation the next time as well.
Thank you. We made a commitment in 2023 to keep agriculture as part of the conversation. Just because the year turns anew doesn't mean we should be ignoring that conversation anymore. I think we need to continue it because it's important stuff. So,
and it's been great hearing from listeners who are enjoying hearing about it
indeed.
as well.
Yep.
That's, without the listeners, we don't really have much. Yeah. And so to have them join us in this curiosity.
We have each other.
I'm not going to say any more at this point. If you and I spent the time we spend recording podcasts just for each other, we would have some big problems on our hands.
I know. And all the editing and oh my gosh.
Can you do me a favor?
Sure, anything for you.
Can you wake up the paper boy? Because I got some big news.
Done.
Extra, extra! Read all about it! Life story of Playboy Penny! Extra, extra! Extra, extra! Read all about it! Me and that Playboy in trouble!
The timing of our recording and dropping of One Nation Under Whisky has made it so that we were able to be excited about the incoming Giving Tuesday, but we haven't had any opportunity to talk about the results of it. And unbelievably, members of the nation raised $560,000 for charities of their choosing in a single, not even 24-hour period.
Yeah.
Because our Giving Tuesday begins at 9 a.m. Eastern and concludes at 3 a.m. Eastern. It's only 18 hours of giving.
Yeah.
And
Wild.
$560,000 got raised in 18 hours of giving.
And again,
mind-boggling.
This is the point that I want to stress the most, is that when we do these Giving Tuesday charity drives, the focus is that we want people to donate to the charities of their choosing. We're not asking them to give to our charity.
Nope.
And that's part of it that I really quite like. It helps to empower people and maybe give a little more than they normally do. And so here we are. We're year 6 into it, and
this was the sixth.
the 6th year, and so 560,000 this year for a total of
Almost $1.3 million in 6 years.
we're just 2 guys and a gal running a company. and the fact that we're able to just give people a little incentive to
that's it.
shine a little light in the world, man. I'm more proud of them than I am us, but I'm glad we could help facilitate it.
For absolute sure, right? Just like we don't have a podcast without the listeners, we don't have a Giving Tuesday without the givers.
Yep.
So,
that's it.
you know, credit where credit's due. Absolutely mind-boggling. You know, I've been speechless every year we've done it, and we've only raised more and more and more and more money every single year. We did say over email to the nation that it will look different in 2024. I've talked about it to you, you've talked about it to me, we've talked about it to some nation members. There's a lot of Giving Tuesday emails in the inbox. There's a lot of Giving Tuesday messages on social media. It's great to be giving. I'm definitely getting a sense that it's becoming a bit overwhelming for people. And we need to be careful how we message around giving when a lot of people are in need of assistance in different ways.
Yeah. So I guess more on that as we move on to 2024.
Yeah, we're still very much in the can you believe that shit? Like, we're still in that moment. A bit like last Friday's whiskey tasting. Like, can you believe that shit? So no, that really tremendous. And then one other little bit of news to get us out of here for US-based members. This Friday, so this episode drops on December 13. By this Friday, December 15, we will be wrapping up all nation shipping for the year.
Yes.
We take a traditional break the second half of December. The shippers with whom we partner need to get their own product out the door. They are overwhelmed. They don't need the nation on the back of that. So we always have a traditional stopping date. This year's is December 15. Yeah. Any purchases made are always appreciated. They will ship the beginning of 2024. So full disclosure there, it will also be on the website. It will also be sent to people who make any orders. Yeah. But we're trying to get the wild turkeys out the door. Those were sold via lottery and successfully so. All of the Westland that's sold out via lottery has now gone out to all of its homes. If it's not your home yet, it is in the last stages of its transit. It's a tough time of year to A, be using our shippers, B, to be using UPS. Yeah. Very tough time of year. I just had it here. I'll give you a little peek behind the curtain, dear listener, without using any names. We had an attempted UPS delivery this morning. Full disclosure, we're recording this December 11. We had an attempted delivery with a required signature at 5 a.m. local time.
Wake up! Knock, 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 knock. Wake up!
Yeah. You don't want your shipment? Okay, it's going back to the shipper. That's it.
Wow. Shows we had a literal UPS are, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, there you go.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So time to wrap that up. It's been a good year, a fun year. The lotteries went over fantastically well. Some things are starting to show as sold out on the website, which is kind of a nice way to round down the year. Our 3 most recent, our VDC, our Woodinville, and our Westward remain on the site. And so make sure you get your hands on those.
Before they sell out too. rearview mirror. Listeners may remember, I don't know, last month, 2 months ago, 3 months ago, whenever it was, we spoke with the wonderful Felipe Schreiberg,
Indeed.
who does, well, he's got a record label / independent bottling company called Rhythm and Booze. He's also a fantastic musician. And at the time of our conversation, he was actually meant to have samples to our house. And unfortunately, the Whiskey Ferry did not make its delivery. However, they did arrive just a week or two ago. And we've got 2 samples, and we're going to taste one that actually, this is perfect timing, Jason. So the one that we're going to taste is a 13-year-old blended malt from a single sherry butt, bottled at 50% ABV. And just this morning, again, speaking of good timing, just this morning I saw that Felipe announced that this particular cask won Best Blended Malt between 13 and 20 years of age in the World Whiskey Awards. So there you go.
There you go.
Yeah, right. So we're drinking some award-winning whiskey here, and so when we got the samples, and you know, this would ring true whether you're in the industry and receiving samples, or if you purchase a bottle. The label comes with a QR code, and that QR code leads you to songs that associate themselves with the whiskey. So music paired with whiskey. And so as we're talking about this whiskey, I'm going to be popping in some of my favorite bits and bobs from this album, which is free frickin' nominal. Fee frickin' nominal? Just awesome. Just it really is well done. And you, as someone, you're a bit of a bluesman, a bit of a dirty bluesman. I know this is up your you're a dirty
Had me until we
bluesman.
got dirty. Is dirty bluesman a thing?
It is now.
Yeah, we actually just sent our nephew, who's just starting to get into jazz, and we just sent him a copy of Kenny Burrell's Midnight Blue.
Oh, there you go.
And I was just reading, it's a nice transition piece from those who know blues guitar into jazz guitar.
Oh, that's interesting. Oh, okay. Yeah. Okay. 2 very different things, but yeah, there are bridges for sure.
For sure, right? Yeah. For the listeners, as always, there's good oil happening here. The 50% has got it nice. It's edging my glass quite nicely. Got some slow legs on it. The color is. I would have, refill sherry on that one.
Yeah.
You could also have talked me into it being a pretty active bourbon cask. It's that type of place.
Yeah, I would disagree with you there. I think that there's a bit of red in that hue, which
you never get a little red hue in an active bourbon?
Not to this degree. Not to this degree. And keep in mind, dear listeners, Jason's colorblind, so I'm the one who really has to judge color.
Red-green colorblind, looking at a red whiskey in a green room.
It's just camouflage. You can't even tell you're holding on to anything.
Holding it up to the window with my lawn right behind it.
So,
you sure you're not getting more green on this?
So I can't tell. I can't tell if I'm getting a subtle peatiness, not smokiness, but a subtle like earthiness to this via peat, or if there's that delicate sulfur that you'd sometimes get from those heavier whiskeys like you'd get in a Kragelliki or a Mortlach or something like that. What are you getting on the nose there?
Yeah, mine feels a little more sherry cask driven
Sherry cask,
rather
yeah, okay.
than a potential peated or lightly peated grain. It certainly builds on the palate as well.
Yeah.
There are the hints of it, the tendrils, as we said, on the Othrusk, back when we bottled that last year. You know, there's tendrils of that kind of heavy, dark fruit, dark chocolate wafting through here.
Yeah, but the palate is where I'm getting like subtle campfire smoke, like heather smoke, you know, like a floral smoke going on.
Yeah, I could be talked into it. Do you think there could be a little Rudvor in here?
Yeah, that there definitely could be, right? Which, for those of you that don't know that, you know, Rudvor is basically Glenturret's peated spirit, and Felipe had mentioned, you know, this is you know, an Edrington blend. It is their stock.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
It makes sense. Like it's the Edrington blend parcel that we saw.
Right. Yeah, it's
out
all
in
it's
the
connected
world,
to
right?
grouse and all that.
Yeah.
So
Naked grouse at that.
yeah. So yeah, that's really, really nice.
Yeah, the sherry's quite soft on it. You know, those tendril words we were using a minute ago. The sherry's just kind of softly, gently framing it.
There's I get this note every now and again with those Highland peated malts that kind of edge towards the sweeter side, that sort of like yellow fruit sweetness. This kind of like dandelion jam. Have you ever had dandelion jam? Have I asked you that before?
Yeah, no.
Yeah, my friend Kirsten, her mom used to make dandelion jam,
Interesting.
which was really nice. Oh, yeah, nice. We'd call them English muffins. You'd call them crumpets with a little bit of butter and some dandelion jam, and magic.
Just for the record, my Scottish crumpets don't look like English muffins.
What does a Scottish crumpet look like?
Much larger.
Okay.
And then quite flat, and then quite nicely aerated.
So that would be like an English crumpet. Yeah.
English muffins have that kind of like overly floured dustiness to them.
Exactly.
I'm not really a fan of them. Yeah,
Right.
Crumpet's more like a pancake,
yeah.
whereas I think an English muffin is more like
Yeah,
scone
that's
gone
a
wrong.
good point.
Scone raised on the wrong side of the tracks.
In crumpets, you wouldn't cut in half, right?
Oh, you could. Well, no, not across the equator.
Yeah,
No. You wouldn't split them in two.
Right? Where an English muffin, you would. You kind of need to split
Yeah.
them in
Oh
two.
man, I would roll the shit out of my Scottish crumpets. My nana would make crumpets. Oh, they were cracking. Miss that old broad. Never said that when she was alive, but you know, it's easier to miss her when she's dead.
Yeah, I don't want to. Like, we don't need to know what you called her when she was alive.
Oh gosh, yeah.
Oh man.
Yeah.
So let me ask you. So we're talking subtle sherry. We're talking subtle smokiness of some variety. What are you getting? Any fruitiness coming through?
I'm getting an increasing brightness on the nose of it.
Yeah.
And it's interesting, and listening to you, almost sounds like we're damning with faint praise.
No.
Which is subtle sherry, subtle peat, subtle fruit, but it feels in balance, right? That's the aspect that I like about it, is not one of them is jumping up and punching me across the mouth.
Yeah.
It's more of a, hey, if you look in this corner, here's what you'll find. If you look in that corner over there, you're going to find something else. But the room itself really fits, really works. It's a cracking sipper. You talk about pouring something to read the Sturk or Wisniewski books. Like, you could pour that and sip that with the books, easy peasy.
Yeah, there's this. I'm not attracted. I shouldn't say I'm not attracted to, but my palate isn't finding the fruitiness. It's really glomming onto this earthy quality and that subtle, delicate sulfur note on the nose, which I love. Like we were talking, not farts. We're talking like struck match in the next room kind of smell. That's dissipated a bit. It's got a bit more herbaceous on the nose, so it's all for me herbaceous and earthy and just like you kind of want to sink into your seat while you sip this.
Yeah, I do have some stone fruit qualities to the front of the palate.
Okay.
But as you go through the act of swallowing and then actually not having liquid in the mouth, all of the peat concentrates on the back of the palate.
Yeah.
And then it's hard to keep the white
Yeah.
stone fruits or the stone fruits to the front of the palate. It really almost feels like it's a backdraft, right? That movie, gosh, was that the 90s Backdraft?
It was the 90s. I think it was 91. 91 or 92.
Was that a Baldwin in there?
Yeah, it was Alec Baldwin. And I think
was Alec.
Kevin Costner. Was Kevin Costner in it?
Oh, interesting. That doesn't come to mind. I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm just saying it doesn't come to mind.
I put a spell on you. 'Cause you're mine. Stand the things you do, yeah. Well, I ain't lying. I ain't lying. I can't stand.
So quick IMDb has us both wrong. So there is a Baldwin in it, but it's William Baldwin, and
Okay.
instead of Kevin Costner, it was Kurt Russell.
Okay. How are we both wrong when I said a Baldwin brother?
Oh, I thought you had said is Baldwin in it, and of course, when it comes to the Baldwin brothers, Alec is the one that comes to mind. Definitely not
Stephen-
Stephen. No one thinks of Stephen. Who thinks of Stephen?
Unusual Suspects fans.
Oh, sorry. Oh, is William who's the lesser of all the Baldwins?
William!
Oh, but I like him. I think he's the most handsome
Said
of all the
nobody
Baldwins.
ever.
No, I like him.
Mrs. Baldwin never even said that.
But Donald Sutherland was in it. Scott Glenn was in it.
Is it 1991?
It's 91.
Ah, well done. Well done.
There you go. Ron Howard.
I feel
directed
happy I got the decade. I could have been talked into 88 just as easily.
it. I'll tell you. I've slipped in, and listeners will have heard it along the way. But I've slipped in some of the music that. Did I say something, Jason? I've slipped in some of the.
Say it one more time.
I inserted some of the music that goes
Jiminy
along.
Christmas.
What's going on? That goes along with this whiskey, and I've got to tell you, that's a nice pairing. That's a
Fantastic.
really nice pairing.
Yeah, it's such an interesting proposition. I may have said this during the interview, or I may have thought it during the interview, or it might have reached the cutting room floor from the interview. Who the heck knows? But back in the days of Good Scotch Drink, my very dear friend Young Jim would write a monthly piece.
This is your
and he
blog,
would-
Good Scotch Drink. For those that don't know.
Yeah. Come on, like nobody knows that. Come on. Come on. I'm being
Good Scotch
facetious.
what?
I do not expect any listener to know what the hell I'm talking about. But young Jim would come on once a month and he would work on a dram with a book, with a song, or a dram with a short story, with a song. And he really was trying to bring those kind of sensory components together. And so I absolutely appreciate what Felipe and Rhythm and Booze are trying to do with these releases. I wish them the best of luck with it. Congratulations on the World Whisky Award for the blended malt.
Yeah.
Definitely a quality sipper. And as
man.
you rightly say, goes with the music fantastically well. And I've got myself a winter soundtrack.
I tell you, if an award should go to a whiskey where the qualification is you want to keep returning to it, well done. Here we go. Really nice.
Yep. Which we've said, right, in the single cask blended malts we've put out to the nation.
Yeah.
Right? What have they all had in common? is they're just absolute screaming drinkers.
Yeah.
And anyone who wants to sit around and say like, but it's a blended malt, and what's the value of blended malt, and I like single malts, and it's like, just drink it. Just have a lovely time getting it over your throat. That's rule number one of drinking.
Indeed.
Delightful. Cheers.
Yeah, cheers to that. So listen, we've got to get out of here. We do have mail to get to. We're not getting to that today. But I want to, thank the Ohnmacht sisters again. Thank Felipe
Absolutely.
once
Thank
more.
you. Thank you.
And just a reminder that come December 27, that will be our year in review episode. That'll be our closer where we're going to discuss our favorite whiskey of the year, our favorite SCN bottling of the year, maybe favorite interview, and we'll have some other surprises as well. So
I've been thinking about all three. Yeah, it's tough. I tell you, picking the favorite episode is the hardest of the bunch, because we've never put out an episode that I haven't liked.
Yeah.
And we haven't interviewed anybody that I haven't wanted to support. Even if we've never met them, known them going into the interview, I've come out saying, I believe in what you're doing. This is tremendous. Power to you.
Yeah.
And so to look back on a year and go, yeah, that's the one that stands above the rest, that's tough. That's really tough.
Yeah. Well, there we go. So it's the hard work that we do, Jason.
It is. If anybody thinks this is easy, it's not.
All right. Well, you know what? I'm gonna say one last thanks.
Yeah.
And we kind of started with this. I thank you and your family. I thank Jess. I thank Swede Scott. I thank the Nolans. I thank all of my bandmates and my friends and family and just everybody who's come out to make my 50th birthday party celebration really far better than I could have ever hoped. Like, really, I'm still reeling from it. So
Yeah, it was far better than you deserved. There's no doubt about that. Haida did amazing. She was the hostess with the mostess, and there is no doubt about that.
Haida's the best. There we go.
She was a firecracker.
There we go. We end with that. Haida being a firecracker.
Click, clit in honor of Haida.
Click, clit. Now I'm recording. Check, check, check. 1, 2, 1, 2. Okay.
Awesome.
Check.
Are you on a quick time, or are you
Yeah,
fixed
no,
GarageBand?
I'm just doing quick time.
And it's going in through your road
It's going in through my road.
and out through your ears.
Now through my ears. In through one door. Innuendo and out the other.
In through the outdoor. Led Zeppelin. Okay, that's a self-evident point. Moving on.
You ready?
Yes, sir. Looking at you.
That was the one they used. They put a paper bag over the cover.
Wasn't that Coda?
No, no. It was in through one door, out the other.
In through the outdoor?
In through the outdoor. Sorry, I keep on getting it mixed up with the Peter Sagan Innuendo Out the Other book. Yeah, look. In through the outdoor covers. It's a paper bag.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. I in my brain, that's the cover for Coda.
Oh.
Oh, Coda's the one that I think it just says CODA across it, right? Mm-hmm. In like a typographic font.
Yeah. Like a long O. Everything is sort of long.
Yeah.
Yep.
I get that a lot.